10-2, congruent triangles. Congruent triangles have congruent corresponding angles and congruent corresponding side lengths. Remember from earlier, similar triangles only have congruent corresponding angles. So we have two triangles on the board, and we have triangle ABC is congruent to triangle DFE. And I had to label them that way because there are 6 properties that make up these two triangles that are going to be congruent, and everything has to have a specific order. I know that angle A is congruent to angle D because A has one little hash mark and D has one little hash mark. Angle B is congruent to angle F. Angle C is congruent to angle E. That's why I had to label it ABC and DFE, because we have to have corresponding angles labeled correctly, and now we're going to label corresponding side lengths. I know that side AB has the 1 hash mark, so does side DF. So AB is congruent to DF. Another side, AC has 2 hash marks, as does DE. So AC is congruent to DE. And finally, side BC is congruent to side FE. So we have triangle ABC and triangle DFE being congruent. Very important to make sure that you get the order correct when you do this. And essentially what you're going to do today is you're going to work on labeling corresponding angles and corresponding side lengths. On this slide, we're going to name the corresponding parts of 2 triangles, and this time we're given the pictures of the 2 triangles. So the first statement we need to make is which 2 triangles are congruent. So we look at one of the triangles, and we'll start with triangle FRD. And I chose triangle FRD simply because it's on the left-hand side, and I wrote them in the order FRD because F has 1 little hash mark, R has 2, and D has 3. Simply because that's the way we want to do things. So the second triangle on the right-hand side, we have to come up with which triangle is congruent to FRD. And that's going to be MND. Because angle M has 1 hash mark and it corresponds with angle F. So, and we can go through the whole triangle. So what we're actually going to do now is we're going to label all the corresponding parts. We're going to label all 6 angles and all 6 sides. So we'll start with the angles. We know that angle F is congruent to angle M because angle F has 1 hash mark, angle M has 1 hash mark. That tells us they are congruent. Angle R is congruent to angle N, 2 hash marks and 2 hash marks. And finally, angle D is congruent to angle D. It's the same angle. They're vertical angles. They are congruent. That takes care of the 3 angles. Now we'll take care of the 3 sides. In the first triangle, FR with the 1 hash mark is congruent to side MN with 1 hash mark in the other triangle. Side RD with the 2 hash marks in the first triangle is congruent to side ND in the second triangle. And finally, side FD is congruent to side MD in the other triangle because we have the hash marks that match up. On this slide, we're going to name the corresponding parts, but there are no pictures, and sometimes you're going to have to name the corresponding parts without the pictures, and it's not as difficult as you might think. First, we'll start with angle P is congruent to angle W. I know this. I know that angle D is congruent to angle X. You should be noticing a pattern at this point. Angle Q is congruent to angle Y. The corresponding positions within each triangle are labeled the same way they are on the picture. So going back a picture, triangle FRD, you should notice with the 1, 2, 3 hash marks, is congruent to triangle MND with the 1, 2, 3 hash marks as well. And F is in the same position as M. R is in the same position as N. And D is D. So the corresponding positions, the way they're labeled, makes a big deal too. So we have the three angles, P and W, D and X, and Q and Y. Now we're going to do sides. Side PD, the first two letters, is congruent to side WX in the other triangle. Side DQ in the first triangle is congruent to XY in the second triangle. And finally, the last combination, side PQ, is congruent to WY. So you're going to have to be able to name the corresponding parts, the angles and the sides, for pairs of triangles that are congruent. One last thing you might be asked to do is you have to find X, as it says in the top of the board. We are told that triangle GHK is congruent to triangle PQR. So we need to find side X, which is side PQ on this triangle, on the right-hand triangle. In a left-hand triangle, the side that corresponds to PQ is GH. So we knew that. We can find that X equals 16 units. Your homework is on page 503, problems 10 through 28, all of them.